No. Or yes.
In this video, we are going to discuss whether you get a credit card or not and why the experts can agree.
When we think of the credit card, we think of something that's been around forever. But it was actually invented in 1949 by a man called Frank McNamara, who was entertaining guests for his business when he realized that he left his wallet in one of his other suits and had no cash. And so he created the Diners Club that would allow diners to be able to pay for their meals even if they didn't have any cash with them. No. Or yes.
In this video, we are going to discuss whether you get a credit card or not and why the experts can agree.
Let's look at the dictionary and a bank's definition. A method of payment, the money being taken from you at a later time. Now let's have a look at the bank's definition. It's a revolving line of credit. Or to you and me, it's being able to borrow a certain amount of money, and the bank will tell you how much you can borrow. This is called the limit. When you've been accepted, you can buy things without having the cash, and you can buy online, over the phone. It's very, very flexible. You do have to make the payments to pay it all back though. Otherwise, they'll charge you interest, and if you haven't paid back, there's a fee for that. There's minimum monthly repayments, and we'll definitely go into that a little bit later on. And the card has an annual fee. And they say, which is really good, you should only apply for a credit card if you can afford the repayments. A couple of years ago, the banks didn't really care whether you could pay the money back or not. But they've been given a bit of a slap on the hand and told that they need to behave a little bit more. So credit cards have a few more rules now than they used to. No. Or yes.
In this video, we are going to discuss whether you get a credit card or not and why the experts can agree.
Now let's have a look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of credit cards. Number one, credit cards are very convenient. They're convenient to apply for, they're convenient to use, they are convenient because they are accepted at a lot of different places, and there are even certain places like hotels where you can almost only use credit cards for certain things, such as a pre-authorization, but we'll talk about that in another video. Second is payment delay. Now, there is an advantage and a disadvantage to payment delay. If you're very savvy, you can use a credit card to be able to take the money that you earn and invest it somewhere else and make some more money before paying off the credit card. So you might have 40, 50, 60 days to pay off the credit card. Let's say that you have an income of 1,000 and you need to pay off 1,000 on that credit card. So now you take that $1,000, you invest it somewhere. Let's say that you're able to make 1%. So that's $10. Now you have $1,010. And I still need to pay off my $1,000 credit card, but I still have $10 extra. If I would have used my cash to make those payments, I would not have been able to make that extra $10. Third is warranty insurances. Some items that you buy using a credit card are automatically insured or have extra warranty. Especially if you're traveling, you can use credit cards and you'll automatically have travel insurance included with that credit card. So there are certain things like this. Online security. So again, debit cards are catching up a little bit to the credit cards. However, credit cards are great for online security because banks will have to pay you back immediately if you dispute the charge, and then they will see if they can sort out what's happened, and only then will they take the money back if they find that you weren't correct. But generally speaking, you're going to get your money back immediately if there's any kind of dispute. There are also perks if you know what you are doing, and be careful with this because there are things called frequent flyers and different other perk systems. And if you know what you're doing, you can use them to your great advantage. They're also there to be able to see if they can get you to buy more than you need to, and they are definitely not always of advantage to you. But if you know what you're doing, you can use the frequent flyer and different other perks that credit card companies have to bring yourself great advantage. And again, we'll make this a topic for another video because we could go very, very deeply into this. And then last is credit score. So this is where the experts are going to disagree, because again, it's one of those ones which is an advantage and a disadvantage at the same time. So if you have a credit score of a certain number, let's say you have a credit score of 700 and you want to improve your credit score, one of the things that you can do is you apply for a credit card. And if you are using the credit card extremely wisely and you pay it off before the end of every month, then you're able to increase your credit score by using this credit card wisely. But we'll talk about credit score again in the disadvantages, because it doesn't only have advantages, and this is why the experts disagree on whether you should get a credit card or not.
No. Or yes.
In this video, we are going to discuss whether you get a credit card or not and why the experts can agree.
And now for the disadvantages. Our first disadvantage is the fees. You are paying money to be able to have money available to you before you have the money. So that's a long-winded way of saying that you are paying for the privilege of being able to spend money before you have it. So some cards will have lower fees, some cards will have higher fees. There's obviously a value add for the cards that have higher fees, which means, for example, if you're with American Express, they will give you free health insurance and travel insurance, and they will give you a concierge if you are high enough in the rankings and if you pay an exorbitant fee. So always weigh up whether the fees are equal to the value that you're going to get. The second is the payment delay. Again, it was an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage. So the payment delay means that if you're receiving your $1,000 and you spend that money, you no longer have the money to pay for the credit card if you have used your $1,000 limit. Now you're in trouble because you have to pay interest when you are late making your payments. You might have to pay a fee if you are late making your payments, and they will charge you interest, which is point number 3, disadvantage number 3. So every day that you have not paid that money, they are going to charge you interest. So it might be at first $1,000 that you owe, then all of a sudden, a few days later, you owe 1,010, and then 1,020, 1,030. But you don't even have the $1,000 to pay, and so it just accumulates and accumulates. So that payment delay is a temptation that you need to be very, very careful of. So as I said, interest charges. And it's not just the fact that there is interest charges, but the fact that it is so high. You're paying sometimes up to 23, 24, 25% interest on these credit cards. So make sure that you know how much you are paying and make sure that you pay them off on time to avoid such exorbitant interest charges. And then there's the minimum repayment. So if you receive your bill and you owe the credit card company $1,000, they might say, okay, it's okay if you just pay $300 for now. And so you make that minimum repayment of $300, but they're charging interest over that remaining amount. So that $700 that you haven't paid, they'll charge you interest over. And the bank is very smart. They know that if they offer you a minimum repayment, you're likely to take that minimum repayment because it means that you pay less, which means that you still have money left over in your pocket, which means you feel good. But even though you feel good, the bank is charging you interest and they are putting you into a debt trap. And so number 5 is the debt trap. And it is a combination of the interest, the minimum repayments, the payment delay. They are setting you up for failure. They allow you to take the time to pay. They will give you a minimum repayment. They will charge you interest. They will charge you fees. If you are late, they will charge you fees. And so very many people end up getting into trouble because they have a very high credit card debt. The bank will just let them borrow more and more and more and know that they will be indebted to the bank forever. And so the bank will be able to take certain parts of their income for the rest of their lives. So this is what the bank would really like to do, is make you a slave. So unless you are extremely good at managing your credit card, it can be a death trap if you don't know what you're doing and if you lose your emotional ability to be able to think clearly, which often happens when you get into that stressful situation and then you have an emergency and you don't have the cash and then you use your credit card to pay for it, but then the money doesn't come in the way you need it to, and all of a sudden you are trapped and you are hooked, and then the bank will lend you more in order to be able to get yourself out of trouble, and then your minimum repayments will go up, but you're only paying the minimum repayments and the interest amount just keeps growing and growing and growing, and before you know it, you have a 50, 60, 70, 80, sometimes $100,000 worth of debt on a credit card. And for many people, it is a nightmare. And finally, our last disadvantage is once again credit score, an advantage and a disadvantage. So while there is an advantage to being able to increase your credit score if you are very savvy with your credit card, if you are late with your payments, if you are only making your minimum repayments, if you are being charged extra fees and then you're getting further and further into debt, instead of your credit score going up, your credit score will go down. So now it becomes more difficult for you to be able to borrow money from the bank in order to be able to pay for a property or to be able to borrow money for other things. It will be more difficult for you to be able to get a mobile phone because the mobile phone company will check your credit history and they might tell you that you can only get a prepaid phone because you don't deserve a postpaid phone, because they don't trust you to be able to make the payments since you were not good at managing your money with a credit card. So they don't trust you're going to be good with managing your phone bills either. So that is the final disadvantage. Let's get to the conclusion now.
No. Or yes.
In this video, we are going to discuss whether you get a credit card or not and why the experts can agree.
So in conclusion, there are some advantages and disadvantages to having a credit card. And the reason the experts will disagree is because some of them have seen the pitfalls and they've experienced it. So they will tell everybody to avoid credit cards. They don't use credit cards themselves. Others have seen the pitfalls but haven't fallen for them. And they will advise people who are savvy to get a credit card, and they will advise people who are not so savvy or who are beginners not to get a credit card. So what is the ultimate answer? The ultimate answer is there is no need to get a credit card unless you really need one. So unless you're looking to increase your credit score, and if you are looking to do that, make sure you have a mentor or somebody who's going to be able to advise you and support you. If you are going to use frequent flyer points, again, make sure that you have somebody advising you to make sure that you are not receiving a $100 flight in exchange for spending $1,000 extra, because that's what the airlines obviously want. So make sure that you are getting some value for those points and not just spending more than you were intending to spend, because that again is where credit cards can get you into trouble. So avoid credit cards unless you have to. If you need one, then by all means go and get a credit card. And stay emotionally detached from what you are doing and stay financially savvy, because otherwise it can lead to some major issues. An example to finish off with. I had a client who I was business coaching, and she had a credit card that she'd been using for her business that had amassed an $8,000. She'd maxed it out. So she had spent $8,000 that she didn't have. And it was costing her a lot of interest and a lot of heartache and a lot of stress and sleepless nights. So I advised her to take that card and transfer it to a zero balance card for 12 months, which means that she was able to then pay the $8,000 back slowly over 1 year, but not have interest and other fees accumulate over time. So she transferred the money across. I told her to then cut that first credit card up so that she could not use it anymore. She did not listen, and she then spent another $4,000 on that initial credit card, which meant that she now owed $12,000 and was paying interest on the first one. She wasn't paying interest on the second one, but she now owed $12,000, and she got herself into some real financial strife. She was able to get out of it, and I was able to just help her with that, which was really, really good. But you want to be extremely careful of those kinds of things. So again, unless you need it, don't get a credit card. If you know what you're doing and if you have somebody to support you, then get a credit card, but make sure that you have a plan and a reason for getting that card, whether it be for the frequent flyer points or whether it be for increasing your credit score. But otherwise, use the money that you have. And unless, again, a video for another day, unless you're using it for cash flow purposes in your business in order to be able to have the advantage of greater cash flow, then I would definitely not recommend getting a credit card. So that answers the age-old question of whether you should get a credit card or not. Now that you're a little bit more financially savvy, go out and implement what you've learned so that you create the life of your dreams.